Come closer to the fire, traveler, but mind where you step. The ground grows soft here, and I can hear water moving nearby. Ah, yes, you smell it too, don't you? That rich scent of wet earth and growing things, the breath of marshlands where civilization grows thin, and older powers still hold sway. Tonight's tale demands to be told by someone who understands that wisdom is not the sole province of kings and scholars, that honor exists in forms that civilized folk often fail to recognize. This voice you hear belongs to one who has sat in council with creatures deemed lesser by human standards, who has learned that the most profound truths often come from the margins of the world. Are you prepared? Good. Listen well, friend, as the night sounds of marsh and fen provide their ancient chorus to this tale of the Bullywug's Bargain. A story of wisdom found in swamp speech, of magical balances more delicate than any spell, and of the moment when scholars and shamans discovered they faced a common enemy whose victory would poison the very roots of the world. The mire of dead men stretched endlessly in all directions, a vast wetland where the boundaries between water and land seemed negotiable at best. Ancient trees draped with moss and hanging vines created a canopy so thick that midday felt like twilight, while the constant sound of dripping water and the occasional splash of unseen creatures provided an ominous soundtrack to travel through this forsaken place. Castle Naerytar rose from the swamp like a fever dream made manifest, its weathered stones green with algae and age. What had once been a proud academy of learning had been transformed into something far more sinister, a stronghold where unlikely alliances were forged in shadow and desperation. Deep within the castle's flooded lower levels, in chambers that had once housed scholars and students, a very different kind of education was taking place. The Bullywug chieftain Pharblex Spattergoo held court in what had formerly been the Academy's great library, the ancient books now serving as perches for his amphibious subjects, while water lapped at shelves that had once held the accumulated wisdom of centuries.
The situation grows more complicated each day,
Spattergoo croaked to his assembled advisors, his bulbous eyes scanning the group of bullywugs, lizardfolk, and humans who served as his inner circle.
The cultists make demands, the lizardfolk grow restless, and our human allies speak of grand plans while treating us like servants.
The chieftain was an imposing figure even by Bullywug standards, his warty skin mottled with patterns that spoke of age and authority among his kind. The staff he carried was carved with symbols that combined the primitive art of the swamp dwellers with more sophisticated designs clearly influenced by prolonged contact with human magic users.
Perhaps it is time to reconsider our arrangements,
suggested one of his advisors, a scarred bullywug whose right eye had been lost in some long-ago battle.
The cultists promise much, but they deliver little beyond contempt and condescension.
And yet,
they have power,
replied another advisor, this one a lizardfolk whose scales bore the ritual markings of a shaman.
Power that we could use to reclaim the lands that were taken from us, to restore the natural order that existed before human settlements poisoned the waterways.
The debate that followed was conducted in the guttural language of the swamp peoples, but its themes were universal. The eternal struggle between principle and pragmatism, between the desire for justice and the need for survival. The Bullywugs and their lizardfolk allies had been the targets of human expansion for generations, pushed deeper into the least desirable portions of the wetlands, while their traditional hunting grounds were drained and developed. The cult of the dragon had offered them a chance at revenge, an opportunity to reclaim what had been taken from them when Tiamat's return brought about the collapse of human civilization. In exchange for their cooperation in moving treasure through the swamp and providing safe haven for cult operations, they would be granted significant territory and the freedom to deal with their human neighbors as they saw fit. But the alliance had proven more complex than either side had anticipated.
The humans do not understand us,
Spattergoo continued, his voice carrying the weight of accumulated frustrations.
They see us as simple creatures, useful for manual labor, but incapable of strategic thinking. They make plans that assume we will follow orders without question, that we care nothing for honor or dignity or the welfare of our people.
The truth was more complicated than the cultists realized. The swamp dwellers were not the primitive savages that human prejudice painted them to be. They had their own rich culture, their own complex social structures, their own concepts of honor and obligation. The fact that these concepts did not align with human values did not make them any less real or important.
There is another consideration,
added the lizardfolk shaman.
The signs in the water speak of great changes coming. The spirits of the swamp are uneasy, and the old magics that have protected this place for generations are beginning to weaken.
This was news that made even Spattergoo's confident demeanor falter. The magical protections of the Mire of Dead Men were legendary, ancient enchantments that turned the swamp into a maze for outsiders while providing safe passage for those who knew the proper rituals and offerings. If those protections were failing,
what do the spirits say about the cause? They speak of a great working of magic in the world beyond the swamp, something that draws power from all the ancient places and bends it toward a single purpose.
The shaman's voice carried a note of genuine fear.
The cultists' ritual to bring back their dragon goddess. It is not just about summoning a creature from another plane. It is about fundamentally altering the magical foundations of the world itself.
The implications were staggering. If the cult's ultimate ritual succeeded, it would do more than simply return Tiamat to the material plane. It would reshape the very nature of reality, potentially destroying the delicate magical ecosystems that allowed places like the Mire of Dead Men to exist.
Then we face a choice,
Spattergoo said slowly.
Continue to serve the cult in hopes of gaining revenge against our human enemies, knowing that success might destroy everything we seek to protect. Or break our alliance and face the wrath of both the cultists and the human kingdoms that see us as monsters.
The debate resumed, but it was interrupted by the arrival of a messenger, a young bullywug whose agitation was evident even by the standards of his naturally excitable species.
Chieftain,
the messenger gasped.
Strangers approach the castle, not cultists, but not ordinary travelers either. They move through the swamp as if they know its ways, but they carry weapons like those who mean to make war.
Spattergoo's advisors immediately began discussing defensive preparations, but the chieftain held up a webbed hand for silence.
How many?
A small group, perhaps half a dozen. but they defeated the lizardfolk patrol that tried to turn them away, and they did so without killing any of our people. They could have slaughtered the entire patrol, but they chose restraint.
This was interesting. Restraint was not a quality typically associated with human warriors, especially those operating in hostile territory. It suggested either exceptional discipline or a desire to avoid unnecessary conflict.
What else?
One of them spoke to the patrol leader in the old tongue, the formal language of parley that has not been used by humans for generations. They claimed to seek audience with you, chieftain, on a matter of mutual concern.
The old tongue. That changed everything. Knowledge of the formal diplomatic language of the swamp peoples was extremely rare among humans, found only in ancient texts or passed down through generations of scholars who had made the wetlands their life's work. For a group of armed strangers to know it suggested they understood the cultural complexities of dealing with non-human societies.
Bring them here,
Spattergoo decided.
but maintain full precautions. If this is some form of deception, we will be ready for it.
The strangers who entered the flooded library were indeed an unusual group. Their leader was a middle-aged human woman whose clothing and bearing marked her as a scholar or sage, but the practical cut of her garments and the well-worn staff she carried suggested someone accustomed to field work rather than library research. Her companions included a dwarf whose holy symbol identified him as a cleric of some order dedicated to the protection of nature, and an elf whose pointed ears and otherworldly grace were offset by armor that bore the scars of many battles. But it was the fourth member of their group that drew the most attention, a young lizardfolk whose scales bore the ritual markings of a shaman in training, but whose presence with a group of human adventurers suggested a story of unusual complexity. "Honored chieftain," the woman said in carefully pronounced but grammatically correct swamp speak. "I am the scholar Makath the Crimson, and I come before you seeking wisdom and alliance in a matter that threatens all who dwell in the mire of dead men." The use of proper diplomatic protocol was impressive, but Spattergoo had not survived decades of political maneuvering by being easily swayed by courtesy.
You claim to seek alliance, yet you come armed and in the company of those who serve kingdoms that have driven my people from their ancestral lands.
"I come armed because the swamp is dangerous, and I would not live long enough to reach you otherwise," Makath replied. "I travel with diverse companions because the threat we face is too great for any single group to address alone. And I seek alliance because I believe we face a common enemy whose goals are incompatible with the survival of your people or mine."
The cult of the dragon,
Spattergoo said. It was not a question.
"You know of their true purpose, then?"
The chieftain's laugh was a deep croaking sound that echoed strangely in the flooded chamber.
I know that they speak of granting us dominion over the lands we have lost, while their actual plans involve remaking the world in service to their goddess. I know that their ritual will draw upon magical forces that could destroy the ancient protections of this place. What I do not know is why you believe I should care about the fate of human civilization.
"Because human civilization is not the only thing at stake,"
Makath replied.
"The cult's ritual will not simply destroy human kingdoms. It will fundamentally alter the magical nature of the world itself. The ancient pacts and protections that allow your people to thrive in places like this will be swept away, replaced by magical laws that serve only chromatic dragons and their followers."
The lizardfolk shaman in her party stepped forward, speaking in the ritual language of his people.
The spirits of water and earth cry out in anguish, honored chieftain. The great working of magic being prepared will poison the very foundations of life in the wetlands. Where once there was balance, there will only be dominion.
Spattergoo studied the young shaman carefully. The ritual markings were genuine, and the formal cadences of his speech indicated proper training in the old ways. More importantly, his words carried the weight of genuine spiritual insight rather than mere political posturing.
And what do you propose?
The chieftain asked.
That we work together to prevent the cult from completing their ritual,
Makoth said.
Not to preserve human dominance, but to preserve the diversity of life and magic that allows all our peoples to exist. The world has room for humans and bullywugs and lizardfolk and all the rest, if we are willing to share it rather than trying to dominate it.
Noble words, but the cult has promised us specific territories, specific concessions. What do you offer in exchange for our betrayal of that alliance?
I offer you the truth, Makoth replied simply. The cult's promises are built on a foundation of lies. When Tiamat returns, she will have no interest in honoring agreements made with mortals she considers beneath her notice. You will find yourselves slaves rather than allies, servants rather than partners.
The debate that followed stretched long into the night, conducted in multiple languages as various advisors voiced their concerns and opinions. Maps were produced showing the traditional territories of the swamp peoples and the human settlements that had encroached upon them. Ancient treaties were referenced, along with the long history of broken promises and betrayed trusts that had led to the current situation. But gradually, a new understanding began to emerge. The cult represented not just a threat to human civilization, but a threat to the delicate balance that allowed the mire of dead men to exist as a refuge for peoples and creatures that had been pushed to the margins of the world. Their vision of a world dominated by chromatic dragons left no room for the complex ecosystems and cultural diversity that had developed in places like the swamp.
There is wisdom in your words,
Spattergoo admitted as dawn began to filter through the castle's cracked windows.
But wisdom alone will not protect my people if we choose the wrong side in this conflict. What assurances can you give that betraying the cult will not simply lead to our destruction?
None,
Makoth said honestly.
I cannot promise that the path forward will be easy or safe. I can only promise that it leads toward a future where your people have a chance to thrive, rather than one where they are doomed to servitude or extinction.
The honesty of the answer seemed to resonate with the chieftain more than any grand promise could have. Here was a human who understood that the world was complex, that easy solutions were usually false solutions, and that sometimes the best choice was simply the least terrible of available options.
Very well,
Spattergoo said finally.
The bullywugs and lizardfolk of the Mire of Dead Men will stand with you against the cult of the dragon. But we do so as allies, not as servants. Our methods may not be your methods, and our goals may not be identical to yours. Can you accept that?
I can accept that diversity of approach may be our greatest strength,
Makoth replied.
The cult expects us to think and act like humans. They will not be prepared for the wisdom of the swamp peoples.
And so, in the flooded ruins of what had once been a temple to learning, an alliance was forged that would have been unthinkable under normal circumstances. Scholar and shaman, human and lizard folk, civilized and primitive, all united by the recognition that some threats transcended the boundaries of species and culture. The war against the cult of the dragon had gained some very unexpected allies, and the swamps would no longer be a safe haven for those who sought to remake the world in the image of their dark goddess. In the depths of the mire of dead men, the ancient spirits stirred with something that might have been hope. And so, this tale draws to a close. Though its echoes may linger in your dreams, the fire burns lower now. But don't despair, I've countless more stories waiting to be shared with you. If this tale stirred something within you, if it reminded you why magic still matters in this mundane world, then please, light your own beacon. That glowing thumbs up tells the spirits of story that our fellowship grows stronger. Subscribe to join our circle permanently and ring that notification bell. That way, you'll know the moment I return with new chronicles. The fire burns brightest when more souls gather around it. Wouldn't you agree? Now, if that's the case, share this tale with another weary soul who needs it, reminding them adventure still exists. Tag a friend who would appreciate a good story by the fire. The more who believe, the more real these worlds become. And if you are new to our hearth, explore the playlist of chronicles that I've gathered. Tales of heroes and villains, love and loss, magic and mystery. Each one carefully chosen for souls like yours. Until the fire calls us together again, may your own adventures be worthy of legend, and may you never lose the wonder that brought you here tonight. Travel or sleep well, brave soul. The long rest awaits your return.